Who is watching over the billions and billions of taxpayers' dollars being spent on the building program currently underway by the Los Angeles Unified School District? And how much power does he have to reel in out-of-control waste, abuse, and fraud in the nation's second largest school district? Stay tuned.
We have two primary missions. One is to prevent and detect waste, fraud, and abuse. The second of which deals with promoting efficiency and effectiveness in operations. So we have two groups of people who do that, auditors and investigators. But auditors are a different breed than investigators. Auditors, we say in the district, they're there to help the school system. They're there to help them do things better, work smarter, not harder. But investigators are there, they're the bad guys. They're the bad guys in my office. They're looking for illegal and improper activity. But the auditors really can be an asset and help school district management do a better job. And most people are not as afraid of the auditors as they are the investigators.
And so when conflicts of interest arise with people that are already on the payroll, how is that handled?
Well, we have two ways we can handle that. We have an ethics office in the school district, and we have our office. Sometimes we will actually do an investigation and refer that matter to the ethics officer for them to take whatever appropriate action they believe is needed, because most of these employees may work for the superintendent. I work for the Board of Education. We have no enforcement powers. We can only make recommendations or provide advice. So we leave it up to the superintendent and the superintendent's staff as to whether they take action. One of the hardest parts of being a supervisor in any bureaucracy is taking negative action against someone. And what happens in the district historically here in my 5 years and before I came was people tend to look the other way. They don't want to take the time to document non-performance, counsel the employees, and try to help them improve. So you have a lot of employees in the system who may not have been dealt with appropriately.
So you've made a recommendation.
Correct.
And the recommendation hasn't been acted upon.
It has not been fully implemented as of today.
And in this most recent one that you put out this year, 2003, you are pointing out that over 2 years have passed and neither the board adopted an ethics code nor the ethics officer's rewritten version has been implemented. Why has that happened?
And it was only after this report was put out that it actually happened. It took a long process. It confused me as well, because in December of 2000, the board voted and approved a comprehensive revised ethics code that our office helped develop. And when we hired an ethics officer, the ethics officer felt it was more important to revise the code than implement the code. And it took several months to do that. And just recently, that code was actually published. But the problem I have now is it's not been implemented.
Do you ever get pressure not to investigate something or to change your recommendation?
Never, since I've been here, has a board member asked me to change something or not to do something.
How about administrators, other layers of the bureaucracy?
There's other layers of the bureaucracy that are more aggressive and encourage us to change things, or in some cases we've had them to try to intimidate us into changing various reports or investigations or alter our scope of work. And we stand up to them. And the board, because of those instances in the past, the board now requires me to report to them on a quarterly basis anytime anyone tries to impair our ability of doing our job. And we report those every quarter. And we have a few, 2 or 3 occasionally. Sometimes it may be a contractor. Sometimes it may be an employee who refuses to cooperate. And so we report those on a quarterly basis.
The people who are get elected with the help of people that do business with the district. How do you handle that? How do you?
Well, I try to stay out of politics as much as possible. When I was on Capitol Hill, I worked for 1 senator, and now I work for 7 politicians, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. But basically, we try to keep political views outside of our boundaries, because we're supposed to be neutral, impartial, and independent. What we did find in there is a couple of instances where inspectors were not notified that projects had actually been started. So if an inspector doesn't know a project's ongoing, it's hard for them to go out and inspect the project.
You have pointed out that the inspectors do not have code books. And without code books, you don't know what to inspect.
Right.
And yet, apparently, there are no code books.
Right.
And you say here that this is going to cost $700 for a set of code books, and that there's not enough money for it.
Right.
Well, what if we're building $1 million projects, millions and billions of dollars of projects, and they're not expected properly because they don't have the code books? Wouldn't that be a good investment, $700 to buy them?
I agree, and that's when we made the recommendation.
In your audit report on Belmont, you did that. You did that. It revealed a lot of interesting situations there, even with some of the very most highest and influential institutions and organizations, law firm, and Big Four accounting firms that were involved in really such inappropriate activity that the district filed lawsuits against them to seek restitution because there was conflict of interest. You recommended that lawsuit, didn't you?
Correct.
And they took action.
Correct.
What is the status of that lawsuit?
We lost. But what happened with Belmont is the district learned a very important lesson, that you can't take on projects like that without competence inside the school system. I wasn't here when Belmont started. I was brought in right after it started and said, how did we get into this mess? And I think one of the biggest lessons we learned is we have to match the people we hire's competency level. We can't just assume they're going to always do it right all the time.
Well, especially because apparently from your report, the contractors are allowed to hire the inspectors that inspect their own project.
Right.
And if they also own stock in their company,
right.
That's a double whammy.
Right.
That's tempting, I think. I guess really your job would be to remove temptation. Huh?
Right.
And that's the purpose?
Well, that's the issue of when it comes to fraud, there's I call it a fraud triangle. There's opportunity, motive, and rationalization. There's opportunities for people to commit fraud. People have motives to commit it, and then they rationalize that it's okay. Everybody else does it. I'm going to give the money back. I deserve that promotion, therefore I'm going to take this money. So our primary role is to reduce that opportunity because it's hard to eliminate motive, but we try to focus on the opportunity. Don't let the district employees and staff and management get into the situation where they're tempted. And that's a big challenge every day because personal responsibility in the school system was lacking for a long time. Even if we go back and talk about Belmont, we couldn't find anyone who would stand up and say, I'm responsible for that project. And everyone wanted to point their fingers at someone else. No one was willing to say, that's my project, I own that project. And now there's a lot more ownership in the school district. For each of these projects that we're about to build or are building, there's someone you can go to who's responsible for that project.
Uncovering waste, exposing fraud, revealing corruption. FullDisclosure.net, the news behind the news.